Today we're going to take a look at the common problems on this 2006 Hummer H3, and then we will decide if it's a buy or if it's a bust. Generally when I do these videos, I just kind of do everything from memory. For this, I wanted to make sure I got the common problems correct. So I wrote down a little list. Now, I was joking around a little bit. They're not quite as bad as what I just joked about, but they do have a fair amount of common problems that we're going to go through here. First thing, we always start around going outside on the body of these. We are in Pennsylvania. This has 182,000 miles on this old beast here. It is a 2006. There is some differences between the 2006 and then the 07 and up H3s, so maybe I'll do a video on one of those someday, but this is kind of specific for the 06s because this is the first year and unfortunately has the most common problems. So going around the outside, if you're in the north, if you're somewhere where they use salt and you got snow and everything, rust is your biggest concern. If you're in the south, you are so lucky because these do have a fair amount of rust issues. Now this one is fairly clean, but it was originally from Arizona, so that gives it some help. We're gonna look along the frame. Now this has been in the mud and everywhere else, but it's cleaned up a little bit right now. And I'll just show you where you need to look for the problem on the frame here most of the time. So you'll just go along, you wanna look at everything along the frame rails. You can see this one for Pennsylvania is clean. Now people from the south are going to say that's full of rust. For Pennsylvania, New York, anywhere up here, this is clean. So you want to come back here and take a look at these spring mounts that are welded on here. They will crack right along here along the frame. Now the back section generally is where most of the salt gets trapped and everything, so you want to look at everything back there because the cross members and everything. But this is where you're going to have your problem, and sometimes it'll even look like they're fine until they're not, because a lot of time it rusts from the inside out. So just be very careful. Luckily this one's okay, but you want to be really careful. Now along the edges of the bottoms of the doors at the pinch welds, those will rust too. This has a little bit of that. Let's see here. So if you look along here, you got a little bit started. Even though this car came from Arizona originally, still some of that is starting. Fuel doors, the aluminum corrodes and breaks off. This one has had that happen. So you can ignore the dings and the dents. This one has been off-roaded. It's been ridden hard, put up wet, all the different stuff, but she's still ticking as of today. And then looking at the back here, not too much. You'll see the rear bumpers and things will rust. Rust, you just gotta crawl under and look at it, but you would want to look up under here. Even this, you can see some flaking and peeling and things, but she's really not too bad considering it's Pennsylvania. These fender flares, they're pretty good. I don't see it a lot, but sometimes the clips on those guys will come loose and cause you some problems. Door handles, they're old brittle plastics. Sometimes they'll break. Mirrors have a tendency to kind of get loose. These ones are pretty decent. They're kind of expensive to replace though. The only other thing I can think about on the outside really here is up on the front. These guys are just held in with little plastic clips. You can see it kind of moving there. Sometimes those will go sailing on the highway, as will these hood little fake, vents. You got to watch out for them because the plastic just gets brittle. Oh, and the windshield pillars. Almost forgot that. Same kind of deal. They'll stop kind of laying flat. Even these ones are starting to do that. So, not major things. They're not going to break down, but definitely something you want to keep an eye out for because all those pieces are semi-expensive because they're a little bit tough to find. I've never done a disclaimer before we start up the vehicle in these videos so you can hear the engine. I have to on this one, and that is because it has an exhaust leak, and that's because I bought a cheap Chinese exhaust manifold that was cracked, or the original one's cracked. That's semi-common on them, but not a huge deal on that. But it has always leaked. The new cheap one that I got has always leaked. I retighten it. It kind of helps for a little bit, and then it starts leaking again. So that's on me. So it's going to not sound that great, but I still want you to take a listen, even though it's a little rough around the edges. And because this has been off-roaded, there's some heat shields and stuff. So, but these are an off-road vehicle, so kind of what you would expect. I cannot even imagine the comments that are going to be under this video because I shot this with the engine making that much noise with that exhaust leak. But it actually is a fairly quiet engine. I just need to get it fixed. So, yeah, the exhaust manifolds do have a tendency to crack. It's not super common, but this one did have it, and I replaced it. And I should have just bought a more expensive part than the one for like $75. So this is the Vortec 3500, which is an inline 5-cylinder, making 220 horsepower and 220 pound-feet of torque. Now, they only use this in the 2006 ones. They switched up to a 3.7 liter after that, which had a little bit more power, and it desperately needs it. It's okay on the low-end torque, but the highway merging, trying to do anything over like 60 miles an hour is pretty abysmal. Some people don't complain about it. I do. I actually don't even know how they managed to build an engine or a vehicle that is this slow in 2006. But it feels like one of the old 4-cylinder Jeeps or something like that. They definitely took after that way of thinking. So they switched it out, thankfully, and made it better. Overall, I don't actually hate this engine. It did have a few common problems, and that was valve seats were an issue on it. They would do a head replacement. GM did extend the warranty on that originally, and so I think a lot of them have been replaced at this point. I have no idea whether this one has or has not. I don't think most of those problems creeped up until later in the mileage. And the other one is that the oil to cylinder, the rear cylinders, it gets oil last, and can cause some rod bearing, connecting rod issues on cylinder 5 is generally the one that has that problem. Again, haven't had that on this vehicle yet. It runs good compression, all of those things. But definitely something you want to be aware of. And there is kits out there to route an oil line to the rear cylinder to help out with that a little bit, so it gets oil at the same time, and that pretty much fixes the problem. It's not terribly expensive. Have not done that to this. This is all stock. So this 3.5 liter that's wildly underpowered has made it till the 4L60E transmission that is sort of reliable. They've been around for so long, and I don't really know what to say whether they're reliable or not. Generally, the consensus is that they're not, but it does seem to be higher in the mileage, over 150, something like that. So it's something to keep in mind for sure. I have not ever had one go out. However, this vehicle, when I bought it, I got it from a guy who was just going to scrap it, and it did have the transmission out of it. So it went out at 175, 180,000 miles, and I put one in from a vehicle with like 180, and it's been working good. So probably plan to do some transmission maintenance on it. Now, just working our way back through the powertrain, we're going to get to the transfer case. There was 2 different options for the H3 for a transfer case. There's an adventure package, which offered a 4-to-1 transfer case. That is the most desirable one. Now, that included a locking rear diff if you got the adventure package that had the 4-to-1 transfer case. This was originally a base, but I put the 4-to-1 transfer case in it. It's still completely stock. It's not any different. This is just now basically an adventure, but it wasn't from the factory. So I put the locking rear differential in it and the 4-to-1 transfer case. The transfer case does have one common failure point, and that is a plastic shift fork inside there. You can replace that with a metal one, and that pretty much fixes the problem, but you might as well do the chains and stuff while you're in there and do a rebuild. But you can just replace that shift fork, and that will solve you a lot of headaches. Now, as we're talking about this, you may be thinking, well, can I make more power out of this since you're saying that the 3.5 is underpowered? And the answer is kind of. You can send your PCM out and have that reprogrammed, and that makes a big difference from what I heard. This is all stock, and that's why I want to do it on this one, because it is a stock vehicle, other than I have some tires on it, which does not help the transmission either. You got to be careful when you're running larger tires. It definitely causes some extra wear on the tranny. And then the other option is you can switch over to electric fans, and that gives you a definite boost in power as well. That's really about it. And unfortunately, even though it's underpowered, the fuel mileage is not that great. With the larger tires, I'm getting like 10. From the factory, you're probably getting 15, something like that. So not efficient, not fast, semi-reliable. I guess that's where we're at. One other common problem while we got the hood up is the radiators tend to leak when they get up into the higher mileage. The fuse boxes can corrode. I don't see it super common, but I have seen that a few times. And when you have start electronics getting corroded, that causes all sorts of funky problems. Luckily, this one has been solid for me so far. Looking inside the interior here, one of the common wear spots in all these Colorados and the H3s is wear on this driver bolster here. That's common for most cars, not a huge deal, but I want to make you aware of it. You're going to see that rip right there. Otherwise, it is fairly cheap GM plastic stuff. It's all all kind of junky, but they actually wear pretty well. Like the H2 feels nicer inside from factory, like when it was new, but did not wear well at all. And like the door panels would fall off and are junk. I have a whole video on the H2 as well. I would actually take this interior over the H2, even though it doesn't look as cool and didn't feel as nice from the factory. This wears far better. Now, opening up the rear seat area, and I'm trying my best not to do this. I feel like I've done a good job so far, but it might all, fall away at the end here. Comparing this to the Jeep Wrangler, and we just got a Jeep Wrangler, like an 09, this back seat is much better than the Jeep Wrangler's back seat. This one's actually like a livable thing. Now, the things you want to watch out for is they had these netted rear pockets on the rear seats. You can see they're gone, and they're gone in everyone's because they suck. And then this rear cup holder, that guy has a tendency to break. It's one that flips out, and it makes complete sense that it would break because it's a bad design. So those two things you're going to find on just about all of them. Otherwise, it's actually a pretty decent place to be. Now that we're inside, we're going to talk about electronics. One of the big ones is the body control module, the BCM. Those have a tendency to corrode and go bad, as well as the pass lock, which is GM security, sometimes will not recognize the key. I have not had that issue on this one, but you're going to want to, keep this in mind. Now, that is an easily fixable problem, other than when you're somewhere and the key won't be recognized and you can't leave. So there's different ways to bypass that and to get around it, but it could leave you stranded for the moment anyways. So the other ones, like GM switches and stuff are not great. So there's a few of those, window or door locks. You might have to replace the switch. They're cheap. It's not a huge deal. Otherwise, you got some sensors that it would cause common issues. Now, that could be a check engine light. Luckily, check engine light's off on this one right now. I have seen it before. But the one I do have on is for the traction control, and that is due to the steering angle sensor. Those commonly go bad. The yaw sensor that's underneath the seat, it's under low point, gets wet, gets corrodes, causes a problem, causes a bunch of funky stuff. Luckily, no issue there for me, but definitely one you want to keep an eye on. And the last, I would say, really big thing that's easily solvable but causes a lot of the problems that I just mentioned with the electronics is sunroof drains. These sunroof drains get clogged, okay? And then it dumps water inside your interior and causes all sorts of problems with your electronics. So you want to keep those clear. If you notice your carpet getting damp, you notice any of those things, you want to get those fixed immediately. It's not difficult. I have fixed them on several of them. You just got to pull some stuff apart over on that side over there generally and poke a little hole through because they get clogged. So the other option is you can buy one without a sunroof, but a lot of them have a sunroof. And then the other option is you just silicone your sunroof shut. If that's not an issue for you, but it's not a terribly difficult thing to solve. However, causes a lot of problems if you don't fix it. Now we're going to take a little drive. Obviously, this is my vehicle, and I know what it drives like. But I'll still take you down the road here, and we'll talk about a couple more things with the old Beater H3. Now you can see my traction control light there. Just ignore, actually, we're gonna do that. Should have put a piece of duct tape over it. We're just gonna do a little pull here, but there's really not enough space to get on it, but right there is really where she stalls out. That 30 to 35. She's okay off the line, but it just doesn't have much beyond that 30 miles an hour. Now, not that this is in terrible condition, but I'm sure I'm going to get comments that say, well, that one's beat up. And it is a little bit. It's got dings and dents because it's been off-road. The purpose, when they built the H3, was for it to go off-road. So I think for this type of review, the fact that it's not perfect is more than fair because that's what you're going to do with it. And we have off-roaded a lot. Yeah, I mean, it's been on a lot of trails for a lot of time. So we will be doing a head-to-head off-road at some point between this and the Jeep Wrangler that we just picked up and did a rebuild on. But you can look at us off-roading on any of my old videos with this, and it's been through some stuff. She's hit some rocks and gotten, actually I haven't really gotten stuck, but it's been used. So on the road, like I said, too slow. It cruises down the highway okay with the 35s. If you go to a bigger tire, this from factory came with a 33 if you have an adventure model. I have 35s, it's not crazy different. The transmission does tend to hunt for gears a little bit out on the highway with the 35s on, which is a little bit annoying, but it definitely causes some extra wear on the transmission too. As far as turning, it turns like an off-road SUV. It's not like terrible, but it's not great either. It just drives like a SUV on big tires. So that's kind of where she's at with that. As far as other steering stuff, it's held up remarkably well for the amount we've been off-road. Now, I think it will need some front-end work next time we put it up on the lift, but I don't have any play in the steering or anything like that. The big thing for that to look out for is the steering shaft the joints tend to wear out the U-joints in there. They're a little bit of a son of a gun to replace, but they're not terribly expensive. I think it's like $80 for the part and a few hours to, maybe an hour or two to get it done. That was bad when I first bought this, so it has a new one. That was just from regular driving, mostly rust and other things cause you a whole bunch of headaches with that, and it's really unsafe. Like that was something I would look for and fix immediately if you have a bunch of steering play. Otherwise, I know I mentioned some things. Everything kind of works in the interior electronics-wise. My sunroof drains aren't clogged, so thank goodness. And everything works. AC, heat, all that stuff. No problem. Windows go up and down. Doors, lock, unlock, all that stuff. Works pretty good. Not that you couldn't have a problem with it, but my experience has so far been pretty positive in that way. I don't love living with this as a daily driver. I do love it for off-road. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here as soon as we get back to the house. So now that we're back where we started, we're going to decide if this is a buy or if it's a bust. The only way I can really decide this is to compare it to the Jeep Wrangler, maybe the FJ Cruiser. The Jeep guys are going to say no one's cross-shopping these two, and that's probably true. I mean, the Jeep sales are just so much higher. Hummer's not even in business anymore, okay? So Jeep won the final battle, and that's fine. But I do think some people cross-shop them. If you want something a little different that's still absolutely capable off-road, the Hummer is probably going to be your option, and they are a really good off-roader. We will do the head-to-head between this and the Jeep, but we haven't done it yet. So I can't really compare them, but this is a very good off-roader. It's taken pretty much everything I've thrown at it so far, and we don't do super easy trails. So I'm going to just compare it to the Jeep. And the Jeeps aren't very reliable either, and I've gone over a lot of problems with these. They do have a lot of common problems. They're a little bit cheaper than the Jeep. So I guess what I'm thinking is, if you're looking for a Jeep as your other option and you want to go off-roading, you want to use it what it's built for, then I think it's a buy, with the idea that you're going to have to put some maintenance into it, especially at higher miles. There's just no way around it when they have been on the trail, or if you're going to take them on the trail. Now, the price around for these is about $6,000 to probably $6,000 to $8,000, depending on where you are in the country. We're in the Northeast. This one is probably not as expensive as those because it has been used hard, but it's also pretty much rust-free in comparison to all the other ones around, so that puts it right in that $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 range. And for that, you're going to be looking at a really rough Jeep too. So I think the H3 absolutely is an option. I think it could be a buy if that's what you're looking for and you're a little bit handy and can put the work into it. If you just want to daily drive it, it is an absolute bust. It's not a good vehicle as an everyday driver. So there's much better SUVs that get better fuel mileage, more reliable, all those things. It's kind of a quirky one. I really like it. It's been a really good vehicle for me so far. It has been overall reliable, but I've put a transmission in it, and that's I bought it cheap and why I feel comfortable off-roading it and beating it up. With that, let me know your thoughts down below. I know I missed some things. Please put them in the comments down below so people see them. Let me know what your problems have had. If you've had a great experience with the H3, if you had a terrible experience, if you think I'm nuts, that's fine too. I just want to hear your thoughts. And let me know if you think this is a buy or if it's a bust.
Yeah. Please tell me that I can't, that I won't, that I fail, that I'll never make it out, yeah. Please tell me all the bad, never good, fill my head full of every single doubt, yeah. Please say any negative thoughts, I pop off when I hear people say I cannot. I get off to the thought of proving everyone wrong, I won't stop to the top, so you better back